Good evening from Central Pennsylvania, and welcome to another Provident webinar. I'm your host, Ed Mann, Director of Training and Education for Provident. Welcome to the Igniting the Future Young Leaders and the Path Forward. I'm honored to be with you today as we gather to spotlight a new generation of leadership in the fire service. Leaders who are not only carrying the torch, but reshaping the path forward. Today, we're going to have a roundtable conversation with some young leaders in our business. These leaders are proving that age is not a barrier to vision and that leadership is defined not by years served, but by the impact made. We'll hear stories of growth, challenges, and triumphs. We'll explore these chiefs for navigating tradition while embracing change and how they're building cultures of trust, resilience, and excellence. Most importantly, we'll learn they're preparing the fire service for the future, one decision, one team, one community at a time. To our panelists, thank you for your service, your leadership, and your willingness to shape your journey. To our audience, thank you for joining us in this important dialogue. Whether you're a seasoned veteran, a new recruit, or somewhere in between, today's discussion is for you. I'll have Chief Jordan Cramer and Chief Landon Churchill introduce themselves after I provide you with our monthly promotional information about Provident. And I'm assuming that you can see my screen. Sam?
Yep.
Okay. Now you know why we keep Sam in the background. It keeps me out of trouble. So this is our Provident webinar series. Provident got a start in 1902 as an independent insurance agency in the Pittsburgh area, and in 1928 they started servicing volunteer fire departments with customized accident and health policies. The bottom line was the founders of the company discovered, especially in the Pittsburgh area, there were firefighters who were volunteers who were injured doing something for the fire department and had no income protections. So these policies got started in 1928. Today, we provide volunteer combination and career firefighters and first responders, for that matter, including law enforcement, with a multitude of programs. Provident, once again, was voted by the Business Journal Business Magazine as one of the best places to work in 2025. And I think we just received another honor here earlier this week. Some of our programs, as I mentioned, our accident and health program. If you're an accident health client of Providence, you and your spouses and your immediate family have access to our first responder assistance program, which is, for the lack of a better term, a stripped down version of an EAP. So you can call and get help with a variety of things. Our 24-hour accidental death and dismemberment policy, which offers coverage to your members even when they're off duty. We have a group term life policy that you can purchase, critical illness and cancer policy that provides coverage for a heart attack, stroke, renal failure, or cancer. And then, of course, our Fire Plus property and casualty program. And if you're a property and casualty client, you have access to our Fire Plus Academy, which is actually hosted by Fire Rescue One, part of Lexipol, with over 800 courses. And all of the full-length EMS courses are approved for continuing education nationally. So without further ado, tonight I get to welcome Chief Jordan Cramer and Landon Churchill to our show. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. All right, let's get rid of this screen here. And move you guys back over here where I can see you. All right. Well, Chief Cramer, since you've been with us before, how about if I let you go first, tell our listeners about yourself and your background, and we'll move on then to Chief Churchill.
All right. Thanks, Ed. Thanks for having me again. It's a pleasure to be here. Coming to you from Appleton, Wisconsin. We're doing a final inspection on our new aerial truck. So again, my name's Jordan Cramer. I'm honored to serve as the Chief of Fire and Emergency Services for South Strabane Township in Washington County. We are a combination fire system responding to about 1,500 calls and growing each year in the heart of our county. I'm fortunate to lead a awesome staff that works diligently to improve and serve an even better community. I also serve as our interim township manager for our municipality, and over the past 3 years, I've held either the interim manager or the assistant manager role, in addition to being the fire chief. Prior to South Strabane, I worked for the municipality where I started my fire service career, and over the course of 14 years, I basically worked through most ranks within the organization, from a junior volunteer firefighter to a lieutenant and a fire inspector over that time frame. My road to the fire service probably looks a little bit different with a start in the private sector. I owned a facility and property management business with clients across 4 states. At our height, we had approximately 25 employees and about 15 trucks on the road. So a lot of the experience that I actually gained in the private sector, and importantly, a lot of the mistakes that I made, especially surrounding leadership, have helped me immensely with running a fire organization.
Okay, Chief Churchill.
Yes, sir. Glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me. My name's Landon Churchill. I'm a deputy chief at the Spring Fire Department. Spring is the second largest suburb of Houston. Down here in the heart of Southeast Texas. And I've been here for about 3 years. Prior to that, I was in Colorado, up in the mountains, a very different climate. Over there, I spent about a dozen years working my way up through the ranks from volunteer all the way through. And at the same time, I was working a lot now. At the time, I was um, faculty and EMS program coordinator for a community college for about a decade. And now here in Texas, I work at TEEX, working with their first responder wellness program, as well as teaching teaching paramedics. So a lot of my time has been spent in both management and in education. Similar to Jordan, Chief Cramer, I spent a long time running a medium-sized arts education company in Colorado as well, and a lot of what I learned about management came from that private sector experience. And so I'm really excited to be here and have this really important conversation.
So before we jump in, Chief Cramer made the statement about learning from his mistakes. And, obviously I'm not a young leader anymore. I'm a retired fire chief. And I can tell you one of the best teachers I had was making mistakes, being willing to learn from them, fess up to making a mistake, and then moving on. So I guess that's one takeaway for all our young leaders now. You're going to make mistakes. Well, even the old guys that are on here tonight, you're going to make mistakes. If you make a mistake, fess up to it, learn from it, and move on. Don't dwell on it. So, Chief Churchill, I'm going to jump in with you. What's the title "Igniting the Future" mean to you personally as a young leader in the fire service?
Certainly. I really like this title. The reason I like it is when we talk about igniting something, we're talking about something that's already there. It doesn't need to be synthesized or created or started from scratch. It's already there. You just need to do the right things with it to ignite it. And that, I think, is what leadership looks like in a lot of fire departments. Many fire departments are sitting on untapped treasure troves of leadership ideas, in the form of young people who have a really good outlook and a lot to contribute. And because of cultural or systemic barriers, they're not able to do that. And a lot of that talent that's available to organizations could be really beneficial to the organization's mission and the community. And so the title here really talks about taking what you already have and igniting it, inspiring it to contribute and come out and work at its highest potential.
So, Chief Cramer, I'll throw the same question to you.
Yeah, I also really enjoyed the title when you guys sent it out to us. I think it captures the energy twofold. So there's responsibility that comes with it, and also that energy that goes along with it, especially for young leaders. So there's a lot of excitement stepping into these roles and having the chance to shape culture, build teams, and kind of push organizations and progress forward. But there's a significant gravity that comes to it as well. So it's not just an opportunity, but it's a significant responsibility that carries real weight, and real impact. So I think as young leaders, it's our job not only to go into these roles with intention, but also to try to bring others with us. So we need to actively seek out who the next emerging leaders are going to be, and spend time with them and make sure that we have space for them as well.
So grooming the younger folks now, folks that might be younger than you to take over when you become older like me, to be able to step into the roles. I think that's important these days. I mean, look at it this way. Either one of you, I mean, both of you've moved from one department to another. Either one of you could get a job offer someplace else tomorrow, leave the department you're in, and as your replacement, waiting in the wings to take your place. And can they carry forward what you've started on your end? I think that's important. So, Chief Cramer, how do you balance confidence with humility as you lead teams that may include more seasoned personnel? So I'll tell you a quick story, okay? And Jordan's been around me long enough to know I got lots of stories, and so does Sam. When I was a young E5 staff sergeant in the Air Force, and I got assigned to an air base, when I first got there, I was an E4 senior airman. 23 days later, I got promoted to E5 staff sergeant. So I went from riding the tailboard on a fire truck to being the crew chief on a fire truck. And within a year, I became the assistant chief for training. So I was the training officer. And there were civilian firefighters there who had been stationed there when they were in the military. And now they're working there as civilians. And I used to get frustrated with them because I'd hear things like, listen, kid, we've been here for 30 years. Don't come in here and tell us what we're going to do or how we're going to train. And I would get frustrated. So I went to a deputy chief we had. His name was Jim Eakes, J.D. Eakes. The guy had a toothpick in his mouth all the time. He could flip it with his tongue. And he said to me, he said, listen, Ed, just because they're not as ate up with it as you are doesn't mean they're bad people. It just simply means they're not as ate up with it as you are. But lesson for a young leader. So, back to the question, I guess, confidence and humility, especially with seasoned people, Chief Cramer. How do you deal with that? How do you balance it?
Yeah, I think that one's an important balancing act, and it's tough too because humility was almost central to who I am and was a core value when I was raised. So things even like talking about our intros today, those are things that don't really come natural to me. But I think leading teams that include more seasoned personnel is daunting, especially for young leaders. I've experienced it a lot, both in public safety and in the private sector. For me, that balance comes down to respect. So respect for the time that they did serve, their knowledge, their experiences, but trying to pair that with the vision for where we're going, and a realistic outlook of where we're at right now, and the fact that we're going to move forward and change together. So I think when you couple those two together, you have the potential for some success in that. But again, it's a difficult balancing act. I think there's rarely a time in the fire service where we should be relying on rank to lead. And that's certainly our last resort after relationship building, transparency, and communication. I remember at some point early on into my tenure as fire chief, I noticed some passive aggressive comments about my age from one of my now former employees. And I let the first couple go because I was kind of, assessing the situation, deciding how I was going to handle it. And finally, the third comment he had made while we were one-on-one, there was no one else around. And that was the time to have a respectful, direct, and fairly uncomfortable conversation. And after that point, it stopped. I never heard a comment like that again. But I think if we're not willing, especially as, if someone's an emergency leader in the fire service or a young company officer, if you're not willing to have that uncomfortable conversation, and very importantly, show respect during that conversation, then we're not going to be able to get anywhere.
Okay, great points. Chief Churchill, same question to you.
It's a wonderful question. I'm glad we're starting off with such a heavy hitter, like a deep thinking question. The first quote that came to mind when I saw this question was one that I think about a lot, and it's simple. Confidence is knowing that you're good. Cockiness is thinking that you're better. It's a beautiful dichotomy, like, because it's we know, especially for a young company officer, if you're not confident and you have an air that you don't know what you're doing and you don't bring a command presence and you don't bring a confidence, your crew won't trust you. Whether it's in an administrative setting or an operational setting, if you look like you don't know what you're doing, you may as well not know what you're doing because it will be very hard to get people to follow you. Um, so having a sense of confidence is important, but it has to come from something substantive and real. It can't be faked. And so when I came to Spring, we had a very rigorous process of interviews, and there were a few folks who asked me very consistently every single time. They said, "How, with your experience level, how are you going to build respect with the people in this organization, differently than somebody who's been doing this for 20 or 30 years?" And my answer was the same every time. You have to do it the same way as anyone else, and that's through relationships. We learn how to trust each other through relationships, through shared experience, through a track record. And it makes me think a lot of you've heard of the kitchen table test for promotions, where if you have a promotion coming up and you look around the kitchen table and you don't want to work for any of these people, then maybe you should, try to go get promoted. And you hear that all the time where people say the reason you should promote is so you don't have to work for one of these other people who might not treat you well. And that is what I call a predatory leadership model. And it's based on the premise that a leader's function is predatory and that they're going to exploit the employees, exploit their subordinates, soak up all the perks, do none of the work. And that's a common paradigm in the fire service, is a predatory leadership model. And it makes sense to try to get past other people and get into a role of influence and power in that model. But if we look at that same statement through a servant leadership paradigm, it looks very different, right? Because the predatory leadership model says you better get them before they can get you. But a servant leadership model says you better serve them before they can serve you. And all of a sudden, it doesn't seem like such a rush or such a problem if somebody else gets into a leadership role, because if they're going to serve, and I'm not discounting the reality of bad actors. Some folks don't want to do a good job, and they are very self-interested in their leadership roles. But a big part of servant leadership is a type of social contract. And what that means is that people in leadership roles have an obligation under an unspoken social contract to take a lot of the heat and accept a lot of the liability for the organization and for decisions that are made. And in my experience, especially with more seasoned personnel, they don't really mind you being in a leadership role so long as you fulfill the social contract. And what that means is, when it's time to make a hard decision, when it's time to take some heat or catch a bullet from management, or from somewhere up the chain, if you're willing to own those things and say, this happened on my crew, it happened on my watch, and therefore it's my responsibility. Very, very quickly will they learn that you're willing to fulfill the social contract, and they don't have any problem with you being there. One of the biggest mistakes that young leaders make is that they forget to fulfill that social contract, and they want to enjoy the perks of leadership without carrying the burdens of leadership. And those of us who have done it, anybody who's been in any sort of leadership roles, that knows that there are way more burdens than there are perks. The perks are few and far between compared to how heavy it is. And it looks like fun when you're looking at the job posting, but it's heavy, it's exhausting, it's lonely. And if you're willing to underwrite the mistakes of your subordinates, and when somebody comes from one of your people and says, "Hey, we're gonna get this person," and you say, "Nope, you can't get them. Anything that they did, I'm responsible for because it happened on my watch." They learn, and I've very rarely struggled, even with very seasoned personnel, to build strong, trusting relationships based on that.
So while the both of you were talking, again, I might be old, but the brain still works at times. I'm thinking of situations, again, kind of back to the same department. I get there as an E4. I'm riding the tailboard. The guy who was the crew chief on the engine outranked me. the next, 23 days later, he's working for me. And this guy in the morning when we're doing rig checks, now we're in Wyoming, so in the wintertime it gets kind of cold. We're doing rig checks. Myself and the driver and the other firefighter are outside doing work. And the crew chief standing inside the stall door with a cup of coffee and a cigarette in his hand watching us. And when I became the crew chief, the first day I walked in, he saw 4 stripes. His eyes got the size of basketballs. And I said to him, I said, look, and it was a private conversation. And I'm sure the term servant leadership wasn't around in 1983. And I said, I don't care for the way you treat people. Now you're working for me. Things are going to be a little different. When we did rig checks, guess where I was at in the morning? Outside with the troops, getting my hands dirty just with them. We did a drill when it came time to reload hose. That's where I was at. I was with the crew during the work. Okay. And it worked. And the other thing I found was find the informal leader within the organization. And if you can get them on your side, the rest of it's pretty easy to deal with then. And
Yes, sir.
you don't get them on your side by bribing them. You develop a relationship with them. So it's nice to sit here and hear you guys talk, and it makes me think of things that perhaps I did right back in the day when I was a young leader, which kind of leads us to the next question. This is Chief Churchill, you're first with this one. What leadership lessons have come from mistakes or unexpected challenges?
Oh, well, my first answer would be all of them. I think all the lessons come from that. You learn much, much more when it goes wrong than when it goes right. It makes me think of a wonderful book called Leadership in Turbulent Times, which is a Doris Kearns book, and it's an exploration of 4 of our most influential presidents and their commonalities. And one of the things that we find in all of their stories is that they made massive, monumental mistakes early on in their political careers, like the types of things that should just ruin a person, and were in many cases hated and run out of the political scene. And then they came back to be some of our most influential presidents. And these are people like Abraham Lincoln and both Roosevelts and Lyndon B. Johnson. And one of the main takeaways there is when you make a mistake, there are 2 paths that you have in front of you. One is to deflect, blame, find a scapegoat, externalize it, try to export the responsibility to someone else, try to explain it away, find a reason that it wasn't your fault, not your responsibility. And the other one is to own it, to introspect on it, to learn from it. And that's a really difficult process. It requires a comfort with feeling diminished, with feeling hard emotions like shame, which is like, that's a tricky one for a lot of us. And if you can sit with those hard emotions and think through all the implications of those mistakes, identify the decisions that you made, and be brutally honest with yourself about why you made those decisions. Because some of the ways that we make decisions as human beings are not very good. We make decisions out of ego or out of excitement or out of fear all the time. And if we can be honest with ourselves and say, oh, the reason I did this is because I thought I would look really cool to everybody if I bought this cool thing, and then it blew up in my face. And that some of the decisions we make are pretty silly, and some of them are not very mature. And if we look at it and we say, wow, that was stupid, then you can learn. But as long as you're still massaging the narrative to make a bad decision look like a good one, you can't learn from it. That's a fundamental rule of learning, is you cannot learn until you've admitted the mistake. The first step is admitting you have a problem. And so that is such a key learning point for young leaders, is that when you make a mistake, you get to choose whether or not you want to make that mistake again and again and again on repeat, which is what will happen if you push it away and run away from it. Or you can just learn it today. There's another wonderful quote that says, the second time you make a mistake, it's a choice. And I think that's absolutely true. When you grab onto every mistake you make and you you look at it and you dig for the root cause and you find the things in yourself that made that happen, then you can start to update your ways of thinking, update your mental maps, and maybe you don't make that same mistake in that same way again. And that takes, to circle back, like a huge amount of humility. And that's where like humility is not a lack of positive self-regard. What it is a deep-seated awareness of and comfort with your limitations, with your interdependence on other people, with the flaws that you have, and a comfort with operating and talking about your failures. It's really about vulnerability, which is a big part of authentic leadership. Being willing to be seen as a human being instead of some sort of a deified, mythologized God type chief officer. This is something that many young chief officers and all chief officers struggle with. We want to be seen as perfect. We don't want to let our people down. We don't want them to know that we make mistakes. And so that creates a sort of vicious cycle where we pretend to be perfect and then they hold us accountable like we're perfect. And that's a really hard place to be because you don't want to let those people down and it gets worse and worse as time goes on. And so it's so important that when you screw up, to your point, Ed, you just say, I didn't do that right. I harmed something. I made a mistake. I did one not so long ago as a kind of a funny story. We cleaned out a storage unit um, because it was full of old things from a long time ago. We filled up the dumpster. I had some staff fill up the dumpster, and then the facilities director sent a snapshot of the dumpster from the dumpster company to the whole organization and said, "I don't know who did this, but the dumpster company was really mad. Don't do that again." And I was like, "Oh, that was me. I did that." And so I just hit reply all and I said, "This is my fault. I did this. I take responsibility. Thanks for letting me know." And I'll tell you what, that was a year and a half ago. I still hear about it from people. They walk up to me and said, "Hey, that was stand up what you did owning that thing." Because nobody would have ever known it was you that loaded up that dumpster or had the staff do it. Nobody would have ever known. It's a big organization. It would never have traced back to me. But you, in front of everybody, said, "I made a mistake." Um,
So apparently you were reading my mind because although I told you I wasn't going to put you on the spot, I was going to ask the second part of that, let you think about it while Chief Cramer answers the question. And the question was going to be, share with us a mistake that you made and that you fessed up to. So apparently you read my mind.
what's the obvious path?
So Chief Cramer, same question to you. And then the second part of that question will be, give us an example of a mistake that you made that you owned up to and it helped you in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. I echo what Landon said. I think owning up to the mistake is a big part of the process, especially as uh, you know, emerging leaders or young leaders. That's one of the ways that we gain respect from legacy members of our organizations is from our willingness to be wrong, um, and to own the mistakes that we make. But I think we could probably do like a webinar series on the the mistakes that we've made and the lessons that we learned from them. For me, one of the biggest ones came when I was a young business owner. Um, and it's kind of tough to admit, but for a brief time, I subscribed to the idea that employees were replaceable. Um, and if someone left, you just hired the next person and you kept moving forward. Well, you didn't really move forward in that way, you just kept moving. Um, but I learned pretty quickly that that mindset was wrong. And I learned that our greatest asset wasn't the equipment or contracts, that it came down to people and that they deserved our time and trust. But I think during that time frame, grace was a concept that really resonated with me. Understanding that people through the course of their lives and employment, uh, they need that as they transition through their phases of life to be able to excel in their professional life. And that was pivotal to me as a leader, and to understanding what a relationship had to look like with employees. And I'm thankful that I learned that lesson both early on and during a phase where I had a lot of growing to do. And I learned it in the in the private sector, before I stepped into a leadership role in the fire service, um, because I was already able to come to that understanding. So that would probably be my example as well, but I'll try to come up with another one here.
Well, to your point, we could probably have 3 or 4 hours just on, gee, this is something I screwed up and this is what I learned from it. I mean, as the both of you were talking, I'm going all the way back to when I was 18 or 19 years old and a young airman in the Air Force and was put in charge of, a crew of 7 local national firefighters in Okinawa, and the youngest guy on the shift was probably 35. Uh, and the senior civilian was probably mid to late 50s. And I, without going down a big rabbit hole, I'm just saying I agree with you. We could spend hours just talking about mistakes that we've all made, and how we learned from them, and hopefully we learned from them anyway. So thanks to both of you on that question. So Chief Cramer, what are the biggest challenges, or if you will, the biggest challenge facing young fire service leaders today, and how are you addressing them?
I think specifically in the fire service, the challenge that we face oftentimes coming into leadership roles at younger ages is legitimately just being taken seriously. Whether that's internally with department politics, elected officials, or even sometimes with community members, there is a bias around age. Undoubtedly, in most organizations, there's going to be a bias around age. And that can be very difficult to navigate. And the politics, whether it's in the station or local government, they get messy. More and more, we find that the fire service is getting caught in the middle of those dynamics as well, which really makes it difficult to navigate, because that's one thing that I think most of us thought should not be something that's political, right? Um, how I'm addressing them and how I strive to address them, at least. Because again, I mean, I think we're all still learning and evolving around these subjects, but is to try to work on our own, what resilience means to us. Um, been dealing with a lot of this myself in my own roles, and resilience with tact. And then, no matter how difficult or frustrating it might be, uh, using some level of respect to navigate those issues as well. And I'll be the first to admit that it's not easy. But I think the key is to keep focused forward, um, and leaning on mentors, leaning on peers, because there's no way that you are the only one going through it. And that support system is everything that we have. Landon mentioned a little bit, about there is a loneliness that surrounds leadership, not just in the fire service, but any executive level roles. And that's difficult to deal with. I do not know how I would get through this position without being able to rely on people. Landon can attest. I talk to him several times a week on the phone. I can call people like you, Ed, for feedback and venting, and a little bit of advice here and there. But without that, I don't know how I'd be able to get through this. So I think those are the important things to work on our own. What resilience means to us, tact, and leaning on our mentors and our peers.
So Chief Churchill, same question to you.
Yes, sir. So one of the biggest challenges I think we face is in social sciences, they call them team charters. And a charter in this context is different than you would think, like a charter, like starting an organization. A charter is a set of unspoken or spoken rules by which a social group operates. And every team has charters, whether they know it or not. They don't have to be formalized, but they always exist. And these are the ground rules that decide how we behave, how we speak, how the dominance hierarchy works, like the pecking order. And we're working in a challenging environment where many fire departments have one charter that they talk about and one that they don't, and they don't align. And that's very confusing for a young leader. So most fire departments, if you ask them what the most important thing was, they would probably say, well, community safety, what's right for our community. And that's a great answer. And then they would say, well, how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to do that by, treating people right and doing what's best for our community, and getting everybody trained well and making decisions that get the right people in the right roles and put the right people on the right seats on the bus. And you'd hear all of these narratives that sound really, really good. But then if you look at the decisions and how they actually get made, there's a whole separate charter, and the rules usually sound something like you have to wait your turn. If you haven't been here long enough, you can't have social status or credibility. Don't ever question authority, or make sure that you are very deferent and respectful to people who have been here a long time and have seniority, even if they're not right. Make sure that with the people who are in positions of power, that you shrink around them and you kind of orbit them. And then you can get into, many fire departments struggle with what is very much like the parable of the emperor with no clothes, where there are things that are not going right, but nobody feels comfortable saying it to the people in power. And that's very confusing for a young leader, because they're sitting there thinking, well, everybody keeps saying that, I should speak up if I see a problem. Everybody keeps saying that we want to do what's best for the community, but the decisions that we make, every time I try to do that, I socially get kind of beat up. And so one of the best things that a young leader can do is take the time to sit down and write out what the formal charter looks like and what the informal charter looks like. What are the spoken rules of engagement here, and what are the unspoken rules of engagement? Because if there are rules like don't question authority in public, but do it in private, that's a rule you should really know at your organization, because you can really, that's a landmine that you're going to step on. You're going to destroy your credibility. You're going to damage a relationship unnecessarily, and you're not going to get anything accomplished. And you can sit there and in a fit of idealism, bang your head on that wall and say, well, but this is a good idea. And you can be quite right and very noble in your intentions and still make no impact whatsoever. Idealism doesn't always get you where you're going. Sometimes you have to be practical, and that means operating in the environment that you're in. And what I would say to young leaders is that requires a huge amount of patience and flexibility. You have to learn both sets of rules, and one of the best things you can do, to Jordan's point, is to find a mentor like that. And that that mentor, you have to be a little picky with what that looks like. You have to find somebody who is believable. That's a Ray Dalio term that I love in his books. And that first, you have to find somebody who has no conflict of interest, somebody who doesn't stand to gain at all or lose by giving you advice. So your success or failure doesn't matter to them. There's no dog in the fight for them. And then on top of that, you have to find somebody who has the ability to not have their ego involved with giving you advice, which means that they're not trying to compete with you. They actually want to see you succeed. And then they got to be brave enough to tell you when you're being stupid. And it's hard to find a mentor like that. And then the last thing is they have to know what they're talking about. And so that's a pretty tall order for a mentor. And so when you're looking for a mentor, like, don't just bump into somebody who you like, and say, oh, you could mentor me. Like, find somebody who's going to challenge you, push you, and help you, and really hold you accountable to the parts of yourself that are not working well in your environment. Because many people, when they're looking for a mentor, they want to find somebody who thinks similar to them, and you'll end up creating an echo chamber, which won't help you. You need somebody who will push you.
So to our listeners, we have some stuff popping up in the chat. We'll go back through the chat and the Q&A as we near the end. So I don't want you to think we're ignoring what you're putting in the chat or in the Q&A. We'll get back to any questions that we have and any comments or questions that pop up in the chat. So I just wanted to, I don't want our listeners to think we're ignoring what they're trying to get us to address. So Chief Churchill, what innovations or changes do you believe will define the next decade of fire service leadership?
Great question. I think we have two things that are changing that are that are the top of my mind. The first one's cultural, the other one's technological. Culturally, we are moving into an era with a dominant workforce that is demanding authentic leadership. And whether that's good or bad, we could have a long conversation about what that looks like. But when we say authentic leadership, what we're looking at is the general definition of that is that the words and the actions and the values are all in alignment. So the things that we say we're going to do and the things that we do are all lined up with who we say we are. So if we say that it's most important that every decision benefits the customer, the citizen, then we can actually look at the decisions that are made. We can look at the budget. We can look at the staffing choices. We can look at every decision we make, and you can see how it's tied to the values. What we're finding is, as we've just broken over the cusp of a majority millennial workforce, is that much of that demographic is really interested in that type of authentic alignment from their leaders. And that's going to be an adjustment for our industry. And what we're finding is some of our recruitment struggles are associated with that values misalignment. And that's going to be a major cultural shift. And our next decade of fire service leadership is going to be us adjusting to that need, where the things that we say we're doing match up to the things that we're doing, which is not something that has been emphasized as much in historical fire service culture. And that's not a bad thing. It's just how culture grows and how culture shifts. And the other thing is, in a similar vein, I'll let Jordan maybe take the AI thing because I'll just talk about data. The fire service is a little bit behind in this, generally speaking, in that we're not using actual evidence and outcome-based data to justify the decisions that we make and the way that we deploy and expend resources. And we are going to see, I think, over the next 10 years, an increasing trend towards community accountability, asking their first responders where these millions of dollars are going and how it's helping me as a citizen. And we're already seeing headlines popping up all over the place where communities are asking, like, wow, that's a lot of millions of dollars. How do I know that's helping me? What are you doing for me? Because my house didn't burn down and my neighbor's house burned down, but you didn't stop it from burning down. And they're starting to ask questions, and a lot of them are good questions. And so, in a political environment that is starting to really hold government tax-funded entities accountable, with increased watchdogs, we're going to have to really become data literate and learn how to tell our story in a way that is not just saying, hey, we're your heroes. Hey, we're here to help you. Hey, we're your friendly community fire department. We're going to actually have to show them how we're making an impact, how this fire stayed in a room and contents in the room of origin instead of propagating to the entire house. And we know that it was because of our response that things are better. And we saved X amount of property value because of it. We're going to have to get very granular and very specific. We are not quite ready for that. And I hope that we catch up to that curve because they're going to start asking us for that very soon.
So I want to point out, and hopefully I'll remember this, we'll try to put a link into everything to the gold ribbon report that was just finished by the VCOS that I'm going to pat myself on the back for a minute that I helped with on data and the importance of data. You know, I couldn't agree with you more. We just have to do, we got to do a better job with data. A lot of departments collect it, but they don't know how to use it to tell their story. And we got to do a better job of learning how to do that. And back to your original point, quite simply, be who you say you are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, be who you be the person you say you are, is important. So Chief Cramer, I'm going to throw that question to you.
Yeah, I think over the next decade, we're going to continue seeing a major transformation in fire and emergency services landscape and the way that we're delivering services, especially when it comes to consolidations, mergers, shared services, creations of new entities and districts, and even the transition into combination departments with career staffing. What excites me around that is the fact that emerging leaders and young folks within the fire service right now are often driving those changes and are big supporters of them. There's been a noticeable shift in mindsets with younger leaders who are far more focused on what we're delivering to our communities, being service, safety, professionalism, and hopefully getting a lot less caught up in things like what color the truck is, which patch is on the sleeve, and whether they're ground grandfather was a founding member or a charter member of the organization. So I think what's going to define the next generation of leadership is adaptability, our ability to cast a clear vision, to communicate it well, not only to our department and internal stakeholders, but to our community, and to move organizations forward.
So you mentioned consolidations and mergers, and I went through one of my own. And when I was the state fire commissioner, I got criticized on more than one occasion for making the comment that more of them needed to take place in Pennsylvania. But I read something today, and I'm just going to read 3 sentences or 3 lines from a paragraph that a guy wrote about mergers and consolidations. And what I want everybody to think about is the people that established the fire department you're part of now did a terrific job. They saw a need, they built what's there today. And there's the 3 lines that I read. Sometimes the effectiveness of mergers doesn't benefit those who implement them. The benefit is a gift to the future from those in the past. So this
Absolutely.
thing was 2 pages long on Facebook. Those 3 lines is what I took most from it.
Amen.
You know, all of us that are active in the fire service are carrying on something that was started 100 years ago, 50 years ago, however, they started something for us to carry forward, and we need to think the same way. You know,
Right.
The benefit is a gift to the future from those in the past. I printed it. I'm going to add it to my speech material because I loved it. And I got to go back through Facebook and find the guy that wrote it so I can give him credit for it. So Chief Churchill, what innovations or changes, what we just talked about, I'm sorry, the role mentorship has played in your development, and how are you paying it forward?
Perfect. Yeah. There's a great book that was just recommended to me that I found. It's a quick, easy read, very simple thing, but it's a beautiful concept. And the book is called Forget a Mentor, Find a Sponsor. And this is, I think, a really powerful concept. A mentor is someone you can call and say, "Hey, I'm in this situation. What do you think?" And they're like, "Oh, well, let me give you some advice. Have you thought about this?" And that's great. It's a valuable thing. A sponsor takes that to a whole new level and says, "I'm going to be an active, engaged participant in your growth process." This is somebody who calls you and says, "Hey, what are you struggling with this week?" Who says, "Hey, I know last week you were really working hard on that budget and you were not sure what to do. Did you figure it out?" This is somebody who says, "Hey, I know that we talked a month ago about you maybe starting your master's program. Have you signed up for classes?" A sponsor is somebody who says your names in the right rooms, some who sees an opportunity and says, "Hey, I saw this and I think you're a good fit for it. I think you should be on this committee. I think you should join this initiative." A sponsor is somebody who's engaged and rooting for you, who's hunting for your success, which is a very different thing than passively waiting for somebody to ask for advice. And whether we call it a mentor or a sponsor, I think that the difference there is super important. And so I would preface my answer by saying the people who have made the biggest difference to me are the ones who have been actively engaged with me. And they do 2 things typically. The first one is that they are not scared to tell me when I'm being stupid. That is a huge part of what a mentor or a sponsor does, is they say, "Hey, I know that, you know, I know that you're committed to this. I know you're working hard. I know you're doing the best, but I need to tell you, I'm going to hold your hand when I say it. You're being stupid about this. You're having a big ego. You're being stubborn. You're not thinking it through. You're too attached to the outcome. You're just trying to win." Like somebody who's brave enough and smart enough to see the situation for what it is and call you out when you're being dumb. And then the other thing is pushing you to achieve the things you're too scared to achieve. Well, I used to have an employee who he would tell me when I was like, "Hey, we need to be doing some more things." He's like, "Hey, don't try, can't fail. Don't try, can't fail. And that we all have some of that in us, where it's scary to try something. It's scary to go take a class, to go out for a credential, to start your degree program, to go for a promotion, to teach something. It's scary because if you do it, you put yourself out there in that way, you might embarrass yourself. It might go badly, and then what? And so good mentors push you to do things that are way outside your comfort zone. A good old psychologist 100 years ago named Vygotsky, he called it the zone of proximal development, which is the area outside of what you can comfortably do by yourself that you need a more knowledgeable other for. And it's a super important role in anybody's life to have somebody kicking you out the nest on a regular basis and say, hey, you got more in you and you have more to offer this world and this industry, and you need to go do it.
Chief Cramer?
Muted. Mentorship and networking both have been truly everything to me. I can say without a doubt that without those relationships, without the mentors that I've had, I would not be in a fire chief seat today. One of the biggest pieces of advice that I have for emerging leaders is not to wait, to reach out and make the ask. That can be intimidating at times, especially when you're looking for mentors of higher stature within the fire service. But my experience with that has been incredibly positive. I've been really, really fortunate to be sitting at dinner tables and in the room with individuals in the fire service that, 8 or 10 years ago, I looked to as idols and celebrities and almost untouchables. And now they're folks that I consider mentors and friends and people that I could call in any moment for feedback. And that's huge. And that all starts with just making the ask and being a little bit vulnerable in that. I joined the IFC, the International Association of Fire Chiefs, probably when I was about 21. You did not have to be a fire chief. There are sections for company officers, for the volunteer and combination company officers. And for me, VCOS, volunteer and company officer section, has been instrumental in connecting me with those people that I just mentioned. I've got fire chiefs again across the country that I can call for advice and encouragement. And that network is what has kept me grounded throughout everything. And I don't know how anyone sustains a career in this field without it. So disclaimer, I sit on the board for VCOS. However, it is a wonderful organization for folks to join. And as far as paying it forward, I try to make myself available to others, and just like others did for me. So I'd be happy to talk with anyone after the webinar who's looking to plug into any of these connections or organizations. The company officer section just launched a mentorship program. VCOS is looking at something similar for chiefs. So there's a lot of stuff out there. We just got to reach out and
And to your point of paying it forward, both of you are on here tonight. You're paying it forward. Okay. I mean, it's another way of paying it forward. And I'm going to put a plug in right now for the volunteer combination officer section before I forget about it. We just wrapped up the symposium in the sun in Clearwater, Florida. Folks, listen to what I'm telling you. Clearwater, Florida. Next year, from November the 12th through November the 15th, again in Clearwater, Florida, the symposium in the sun will be held. And I'm going to throw a plug out here. Again, there are scholarships available. Okay, there's a scholarship named after Jim Seavey. There's a scholarship named after Rich Gasaway. You get the scholarship, you get a free ride to go to the symposium in the sun. Provident sponsors the John Buckman Leadership Award. If you're nominated for it and you win, Provident pays for your round trip airfare, pays for your motel, takes you out to dinner one night while you're there, and VCOS comps you the cost for the symposium. What, there was 500 people there this year, 500 plus people in attendance this year.
800
They sold out this year, folks. And you can't beat the weather in Clearwater in November. So there's a plug to try to get you. And when they open the registration, don't wait. Jump on board in a hurry. Or you'll find that you want to go and can't because there aren't any seats left. So, all right, I'm going to move on here to the next question. Chief Churchill, how do you handle generational differences within your team?
Great question. I can keep it a little short, although that's something we could really unpack, because the roots of it are that you handle those differences the same way you handle all the other differences. Generational differences are not different than cultural differences. They are not different than any other type of way that people differ. And the way you solve that is by creating a team culture and a team charter that values those differences in perspective and experience. It's so important that a team recognizes that we're all working in the same direction and we all bring something different. We can't all be playing the same position. We can't all be bringing the same skills and competencies. And we wouldn't want that. That would create a really imbalanced team. So people with different perspectives, whether that's culturally, generationally, life background, those different experiences and perspectives are super valuable for team success. And generations is just one piece of that. The other thing that I would really recommend is opening an honest conversation. If you're really stuck in it, it's a good idea to get an expert, like a professional who knows how to facilitate this conversation, because we all get stuck in some real unhelpful generational generalizations and tropes. And some of those are about what we end up doing a lot is trying to explain poor interpersonal skills as a generational trait. So we say that people of older generations are just brash and harsh, or we say that people of younger generations are just can't take any feedback. And those, in all cases, are just bad interpersonal skills. And it's not really fair to generalize them to a generation because that's not true. There are some really compassionate, empathetic, great communicators in older generations, and there are some people who are really gritty in younger generations. And we've all worked with those people, and generalizations are usually not very helpful. So starting to have that conversation where we don't assign negative traits to entire groups of people and we let individuals and their character speak for themselves is a very powerful way to solve generational friction in the workplace.
Great answer. Chief Cramer?
Yeah, we're gonna keep it brief. This one has a lot to do with respect as well, but I walked into an organization 4 years ago that needed substantial change. And one of the biggest parts of that was both gaining respect and showing respect to our legacy, well, what I call our legacy members in organizations. So the older generation, or the back row, as a lot of folks see them during their company meetings or whatnot each month. The folks that sit in the back row and mumble every decision that's made, every change that's made. Yeah. It's very difficult to get those folks on board, but those are some of the most important stakeholders within your organization to try to get on the same page as you. And I think through respect, through showing, similar to that statement that you read a couple minutes ago, Ed, through communicating the fact that we are here to ensure that the foundation of these organizations continues on to the next generation so that we can hand it off to someone else. That's why we're here, and that's why we're making changes. It is not to diminish or erase the actions that they took to build the organization. It is to evolve and to ensure that we can hand it off to the next generation. Otherwise, it will cease to exist and it won't be here to hand off.
All righty. So, Chief Cramer, you're first with this one. If you could change one thing about the fire service today, what would it be and why?
It's a tough one, because I think in a lot of ways we are moving forward in the right direction in the fire service as a whole. I was thinking about this for a while. I think if I could change one thing, it would be to try to refocus the industry as a whole on what should be our shared mission. I think we lose sight of it. Whether it's a divide between volunteer and career firefighters, internal union dynamics, local politics, there are a lot of competing interests that pull us away from what really matters, and that's serving the public and protecting each other. So we say we're built on this brotherhood and sisterhood. And if we're being honest, which we should be, that's not always easy to find within the fire service. And I would love to see more unity around purpose and delivering the best possible service to the communities that count on us.
Okay, so I guess we could default to what Chief Brunacini used to say all the time. It's all about Mrs. Smith.
That's
You
right.
know, if we all could just remember that that's what it's about. I don't care if it's Mrs. Smith, Mr. Smith, I don't care who the person is. If we could all remember that that's the basic reason why we exist, that would be very beneficial. I'm going to share one thing I'd like to change about today's fire services if I could. And
Euro helmets.
I get in trouble. I get in trouble with my wife about this one all the time. So I'll sit in the living room and I'll see something on Facebook, and a fire department shows up and it takes them 5 minutes to get water on a fire. And I'm talking out loud the whole time. And the wife says, "Why do you watch them?" Now, I could comment on it and make my post on Facebook, but that serves absolutely no purpose whatsoever. And then we want to know why we have a difficult time recruiting people when our alleged brothers and sisters are on Facebook bashing one another. And I'm a member of the general public and I see this on Facebook and I'm going, you want me to join that organization? After something appears on Facebook and 500 people bash the daylights out of them, and there are other firefighters that are bashing them, we're not helping one another when we do stuff like that. Do I get frustrated when I see it? Sure. And I voiced my opinion to my wife, but it doesn't leave the living room. I just wish we could get people to stop doing that. I know that's wishful thinking, but it drives me crazy when I see that on Facebook. And it's like Rich Gasaway says, how can you comment on something when you weren't there? You have no idea what was going on at that moment in time that caused the delay or caused someone to do what they did. But by God, everybody says, the keyboard warriors, they get them phones out and go to, banging away with their thumbs. And we're not doing the fire service any justice when we do stuff like that. So enough of my editorial on that. So as we near the end of the webinar, let's wrap up with 2 more questions. Chief Churchill, what's one piece of advice you'd give to your younger self just before stepping into leadership?
I would say be more focused on team victory than personal glory. If I could teach that one thing to everybody in the fire service, and to me as a younger person, this was a hard lesson to learn. I liken a lot of fire departments to pee-wee soccer teams. I coach pee-wee soccer, and what happens is that everybody runs for the ball, and everybody's trying to make a goal for themselves. They're trying to look good themselves. They're not working together as a team. They're not passing. They're not all focused on their shared goal. They're looking for personal glory. And that's a really ineffective way to run an organization. And it's a really ineffective way to run a team. I tell a lot of people that if you're trying to win a race, there are 2 ways to win a race. One is you can run really fast, and the other way is to trip your opponents. And the fire service, to your point, is full of this culture where we make losers out of each other. We are absolutely brutal on each other to lift ourselves up. One of the best ways for me to feel like a winner is to make you feel like a loser. And we're all on the same team. We're all kicking the ball towards the same goal, and we should not be tripping each other up and trash talking each other inside the crew, inside the shift, inside the fire department, or inside the industry. We're all on the same team, and team victory is much more important than personal glory. It's much more important to have the best idea versus my idea.
Chief Cramer, same question.
I think I would boil it down to just keep going. there are going to be moments that test patience, resilience, confidence, um, feel isolated, like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders. Um, but I tell myself to power through. I think leadership's not about perfection, it's about persistence. So keep showing up, humility, keep advocating, and keep doing the right thing when especially when it's hard and unpopular. Um, yeah.
Well, so the next question, and this will be the last one for tonight. We're coming up on an, and then I want to get back through the Q&A and the comments with everybody. So, Chief Cramer, what message would you like to leave with the next generation of fire service professionals watching this webinar?
That we need you. And that doesn't mean that we need you to fill a slot or just to wear a red helmet and have a title, but we need you to lead with heart and integrity. You're going to be tested, but if you just stay rooted in the mission, surround yourself with good people, and never lose sight of where you started.
Chief Churchill?
Absolutely. The message I would share is sudden change happens slowly. This industry that we're in, public safety and emergency services, is evolving always. And do not undersell each of our individual contributions to that growth and evolution. It does actually matter what every single person is doing, how they treat the people around them, how they treat their customers and their citizens, whether they act with integrity and character. Don't convince yourself that what you're doing doesn't matter. Every single one of us in this industry is setting the standard, and the ripple effects of our choices and the impacts that we have on the people around us, whether it's as a role model or a mentor, are vast. So don't convince yourself that what you're doing doesn't matter. It absolutely does.
Great. So, all right, I'm going back through here. Some of these are just comments. And if you want to chime in on the comments that made, you're more than welcome to do so. So Robert posted, I found that over my career that you need to gain the respect of your personnel, and the best way to do that is to participate with your personnel throughout the day. You may get your hands dirty, but you get to know them. They also get to know you. No matter the age differences, it helps gaining trust and respect. I couldn't agree with him more. Something I used to do as the state fire commissioner, and some of it was a little selfish, I'll be honest with you. When we had structural burns at the fire academy, and usually the last day was on a Friday, it was therapy for me, one, to get out of Harrisburg and get away from 253 politicians. But I would go up and go into burn buildings with the students. And if I would sit down on the bleachers with a student in a pair of jeans and a job sweat, and I just came out of the burn building, those students that were from all around the state were willing to tell me what was on their mind. If I'd have went down there and sat on the bleachers in a suit and tie, they wouldn't have told me squat. And a lot of them, it was like, wait a minute, are you sure you're the state fire commissioner and you're going into the burn building with me? Because they couldn't believe it. Now, I'll be honest, there was some, look, I like playing in fire. I was a lot younger then. But I also learned a lot by just sitting there and listening to the conversations and having the students telling me honestly what was on their mind. So to your point, Robert, I think all three of us absolutely agree with what you're saying. Robert has a question here. How do you get younger generations to be motivated to become leaders in smaller organizations? I'm finding many who want the recognition, but without the work or the true responsibility. Any way to overcome any of that? Any
I have a thought.
suggestions?
I think you have two separate questions there. The first one is how to motivate people, and maybe I'll let Chief Cramer answer that part. I'll answer the second part, which is people who want the recognition and the social status that comes with promoting, but they don't want to do the true work or responsibility. I would challenge you, Robert, and say that that's not a generational trait. That's a character problem, and I would suggests that I see that character problem across all generations. There are goobers in every generation who want to sit in the seat and not do the work. I don't think there are any exceptions to that. And I don't think that is particularly more prevalent in any particular generation. So I'll pass it to Chief Cramer for motivation.
Yeah, what I thought about when I originally read your message, Robert, was they might not be the right folks, you know. That's something that sometimes we have to realize is that they may not be the ones that are cut out for leadership if you are working or if you are having to work that hard and think that hard at how to motivate younger people to be leaders. If we are giving the resources, time, and efforts to make that happen and coaching them, and it's not coming through, they may not be the right ones.
So I read an article, I don't remember when it was, and I have a tendency to agree with it. Sometimes you find yourself spending 80% of your time dealing with 20% of your people. And this guy referred to that 20% as mutts, okay? Now I don't know if I agree with that term, but that's what he referred to him as. And he basically ended the article by saying, look, focus your time on the people that are doing right and want to move forward and invest in those people. And sooner or later, the 20% that you're having the trouble with, one of two things will happen. They'll either go away or they'll come along. Now, I don't know how true that dynamic is, but when you think about it, when you have to focus so much time on a bad apple, it's taken away from what you could be contributing to the good people to help move them along in their careers. So,
And those good
there's some
people,
validity to what he said.
notice the amount of time that you're spending on the bad apples and not them.
Yeah. So an old friend here has a comment, Tiger Schmittendorf. And Tiger, I'll be reaching out to you because it's time to hit you up for another webinar in 2026. As Billy G reminded us recently, do what you're qualified to do. Stay in your lane. If you don't know, you don't know, and it's okay to say, I don't know. Christopher Ship, as a young executive officer, I strive to be fair, honest, and consistent. Good rule to live by. I'm going to assume that both of my chiefs agree with that statement as well. Tiger Schmittendorf again. And he says, I can write this one down. I already copied and pasted in a Word document. If your decision-making process doesn't start and end with what's right for the customer, there's a real good chance we're not making the right decisions. Christopher Ship again, emerging leaders, you must be meaningful. You must build meaningful relationships. These relationships oftentimes turn into mentorships. So George, I can't catch the last name here. I'm with one volley and one combination. We have problems with senior members, career members who rarely show up. And they talk down, criticize the new volley members for small things, even though those newer members are the ones consistently showing up, running calls, helping out at the station. It really burns me up. Seniority deserves respect, but if you basically never show up or you participate, then I feel you have less room to trash talk. I couldn't agree more. And we could probably spend 3 hours on trying to give you advice on how you could fix that. And why I'm thinking of it, you will have the email addresses for both the chiefs in the email you receive tomorrow. And you'll be able to email these chiefs directly if you're looking for advice or you have additional questions for them. Our dear friend, and I do believe I'm going to get Madero. I know I'm going to get your location wrong. You're either joining us from the Philippines or down in the Caribbean. I'm not remembering for sure. He joins us every month. Very useful information, especially mixed with generations at present. A lot of factors to consider in the discussion somewhat gives us guidance. Ignite future leaders in emergency services. Thank you very much, Chief Ed Mann, Chief Churchill, and Chief Cramer for a very informative personal experience. Became more practical work for the team as a team. So I don't see anything in the Q&A. And unless Chief Cramer or Chief Churchill, you have any final thoughts?
Appreciate the opportunity and the participation.
Well, I certainly look, we didn't lose anybody tonight. We started with a number. We pretty much stayed with that number throughout, which is always good. I know we had, I think Sam said like 245 registered. We usually get about a 50% attendance. Let's face it, guys, and this is something that frustrates me at times. You know, we do a webinar on lithium ion batteries, the fun stuff, and we have 300-400 people. We do something on leadership, and I'm glad that the people that joined us, and I hope most of them are young, new, emerging leaders. If there's some old timers on here, I hope you leave tonight with some new thoughts on going forward. So, Chief Cramer and Churchill, I want to thank you both for joining us tonight and sharing your experiences with our listeners. I want to also thank our listeners for taking time out of their schedules to be with us. I want to remind the audience there'll be a brief survey we would like you to complete. Keep an eye in your email from me that will have your certificate of attendance attached for tonight's webinar. Again, tonight's episode will be uploaded to providentins.com, and you'll receive that link in an email within the next day. Please check your spam folders and junk email before you email me and tell me you didn't get your certificate. For those of you who use the webinar training as a group, when you receive the thank you email from Sam, there'll be an Excel spreadsheet attached. Please use this to send the names and email addresses for me to use for your certificates. It makes life a whole lot easier for me if you have it in a spreadsheet. You can review previous webinars at www.providentins.com and use the training resources link in the upper right-hand corner of the page. We're not going to have a webinar or a podcast in December due to the holidays. I want to take this opportunity to wish everybody a Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays. And thank you for joining us throughout this past year. My wish is that you have a safe holiday season and that you'll join us in January. Please keep your eyes open to your email for our first webinar in January of 2026. And until we meet again, stay safe for your family's sake.